The accusation came on a Tuesday morning, which somehow made everything worse. Thea Harwell had been at her desk since 6:30, the way she always was, coffee going cold beside her keyboard as she worked through the third quarter reconciliation. The numbers never lied to her. They never called her names, never looked her over and found her wanting, never made her feel like she was taking up too much space in a room. She trusted them the way she trusted very few things in her life. She did not hear Cordelia Nash coming. "Step away from the computer." Cordelia's voice arrived before she did, cool, deliberate, carrying across the open accounting office like something rehearsed. "Now, Thea." Thea looked up. 2 security guards had come in behind Cordelia. Big ones, the kind the hotel kept near the loading docks, not near the executive floor. What's going on? Cordelia held up a folder. $83,000 transferred out of the hotel's operating reserve over the past 6 weeks. "Through your credentials. From your workstation." The words landed wrong, like sentences spoken in a language Thea almost understood. "That's not possible. I would never." "We have the logs." Cordelia set the folder on the desk without opening it. "You had access. You had opportunity." She glanced at Thea's screen, at the careful columns of figures, and something flickered behind her eyes that Thea could not name but would remember later. "Security will need to escort you out while we conduct a full audit." "I haven't stolen anything." "Then you have nothing to worry about." Cordelia nodded once, and the guards moved. Each one took an arm. Thea's chair scraped back. She stumbled, caught herself, tried to keep her balance as they walked her toward the office door. 3 other accountants sat frozen at their desks, staring. One looked away. The others did not. "This is a mistake," Thea said. Her voice stayed steadier than she felt. "Cordelia, this is a mistake." Cordelia followed them into the hallway. Her heels clicked against the marble floor in a slow, unhurried rhythm. "I warned HR about the discrepancies last week," she said, loud enough that a passing bellman stopped to look. "I gave you every opportunity to come forward on your own." That was a lie. Thea knew it was a lie. But the bellman didn't know that, and neither did the 2 housekeeping attendants who had paused at the end of the corridor watching with wide eyes. "Let go of me." Thea pulled against the guard's grip. "I can walk on my own." "Stop resisting," one of them said. "It'll go easier if you cooperate." She wasn't resisting. She was standing up straight, trying to make herself take up as much space as she was entitled to, trying not to feel the way she always felt when a room full of people looked at her and saw something that didn't belong. The slap came without warning. She had turned to say something. She couldn't remember what. And Cordelia's palm caught her across the cheek so hard that Thea's glasses flew off and hit the marble floor. The crack of the lens was sharp and final in the quiet hallway. No one moved. Someone in a dark suit near the elevator turned his face away. A housekeeper pressed back against the wall. Both security guards looked straight ahead, as though they'd heard nothing, seen nothing, existed nowhere near this moment. Thea pressed her hand to her face. Her cheek burned. She could taste copper at the corner of her mouth. "Don't make a scene," Cordelia said quietly. "Enough." The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Roman Devereaux had a particular quality of stillness that people noticed before they noticed him. The way a room changes temperature before a storm arrives. He was standing 10 feet away at the hallway junction, his coat not yet removed, a carry-on bag still on his shoulder. He had, apparently, come directly from wherever he'd been and walked straight into whatever this was. He looked at the guards. "Release her." They let go immediately. He looked at Cordelia. Something passed across his face that Thea could not read. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more deliberate, the way a building's foundation doesn't crack all at once. He said nothing else to Cordelia. He looked at Thea instead, at the mark rising along her cheekbone, and said simply, "Come with me." He led her to a private conference room 2 floors up, closed the door, and stood quietly for a moment while she sat down and tried to stop her hands from shaking. She failed at that last part. A first aid kit appeared on the table. One of his people had materialized from somewhere, placed it there, and disappeared again. "You don't have to do this," Thea said. "I'm fine." "You're not." He said it without particular emotion, the way someone states a number. He opened the kit himself and held out an antiseptic wipe, and when she didn't take it immediately, he simply waited, patient in a way that men like Roman Devereaux were not supposed to be. She pressed it against the corner of her mouth, winced. "Did you take the money?" he asked. She looked up. "I need to know," he said. "Not for the investigation. I'll find out either way. I'm asking you directly." "No," she said. "I have never taken anything from this hotel. Not a pen, not a parking validation, nothing." He studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, the way someone closes a file they've finished reading. "I know," he said. He stepped outside briefly. Through the glass wall of the conference room, she watched him speak to a quiet, precise man she'd learned was his chief of operations. A man named Stanton, who seemed to communicate primarily through single-word responses and small, deliberate silences. Whatever Roman said took less than 30 seconds. Within minutes, the Devereaux Grand Hotel entered a state of quiet, complete lockdown. Stanton's team moved through the hotel the way water moves through a pipe. Inevitable, thorough, completely without drama. Every security recording from the past 2 months, every access log, every entry in the system that touched the operating reserve account. It took 4 hours. The result was not complicated. $83,000 had been siphoned through a ghost vendor. Cordelia Nash had created 11 months earlier. She had used Thea's credentials, obtained through an IT oversight that Cordelia, as director of operations, had deliberately avoided flagging. She had spent 3 weeks building a paper trail designed to look like Thea's work. And she had planned the confrontation for a Tuesday morning, when Roman was scheduled to be in New York. He had come back a day early. Stanton set the report on Roman's desk without comment. Roman read it without expression and closed the folder. "Bring everyone to the main conference room," he said. "All staff. 10 minutes." They came from every department: front desk, concierge, kitchen, maintenance, housekeeping, accounting, security. 81 employees standing in the hotel's largest event space. Not a single person certain why they'd been called. Cordelia stood near the front, still composed, still certain that whatever came next would confirm her authority. Roman entered alone, no announcement. He stopped in the center of the room and looked at Cordelia with the calm, specific attention of someone who has already made a decision and is simply completing the formality of saying it aloud. "Did you create the Hartley supply account in the hotel's vendor system?" A pause. "That account was established for." "Yes or no?" Cordelia's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Did you transfer hotel funds through that account?" "Yes." "Did you build the evidence against Thea Harwell deliberately?" The room went completely still. Cordelia lifted her chin. She was careless with her credentials. "I simply." "Did you strike her in the hallway this morning?" No answer. Roman looked across the assembled staff. "The investigation is finished. Every transfer has been traced. The account was created by Ms. Nash and used exclusively by Ms. Nash. Thea Harwell did not steal from this hotel. She was framed." The silence was absolute. "Cordelia Nash, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. You will be escorted from this property and referred to the district attorney's office." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Stanton." Stanton materialized from the back of the room. For the first time, something flickered in Cordelia's expression that looked like actual fear. As two security officers guided her toward the exit, she protested the entire way, threatening lawsuits, demanding explanations that no one offered. Roman turned back to the 80 employees standing in uncomfortable silence. "I expect every person who works in this building to be treated with dignity," he said. "That is not aspirational. That is the floor. If anyone here believed what happened in that hallway this morning was acceptable, or looked away when they should have spoken, I'd suggest using the next few days to think carefully about what you'd like that to mean going forward." He let the silence hold. "We're done here." Life at the Devereux Grand returned to its usual rhythms within a week. New protocols were implemented. Thea's name was cleared in every system. She received a written apology from the hotel's parent company, signed by 3 executives whose names meant very little to her. What meant something was smaller than that. The morning after the investigation closed, she arrived at her desk at 6:30 to find her cracked glasses had been replaced overnight. Exact same frame, same prescription. No note, no explanation. She suspected she knew. Roman, for his part, told himself that he noticed Thea Harwell the same way he noticed any competent employee, professionally, briefly, on the basis of good quarterly reports. He held this position with some conviction for approximately 2 weeks before Stanton handed him a file he hadn't asked for. "You've asked about her 3 times this week," Stanton said. "I ask about all department heads." "She's not a department head." "She should be." Roman set the file down without opening it. That's all. Stanton left without comment, which was his particular way of disagreeing with something. The truth was that Roman had started noticing her the way you notice something you weren't looking for. She came in earlier than anyone. She left later than most. She never ate lunch at her desk. She went to the staff break room, ate whatever she'd packed, and by the time she left, she'd usually talked to whoever was there, remembered their names, asked about their children or their commutes, or the sister in Denver who was getting married in October. She fixed things that weren't her job to fix. He learned this gradually through Stanton's quiet and unsolicited intelligence, the junior accountant who'd made a processing error. Thea had stayed 3 hours late to help him correct it, told him not to mention it to anyone, told him everyone makes mistakes in their first 6 months, and it doesn't mean anything permanent about who they are. The overnight security guard whose wife was in the hospital. Thea had quietly adjusted his time records with a payroll note that explained the situation without embarrassing him. The dishwasher who'd shattered a rack of hotel glassware and was terrified of the cost. Thea had written it up as a vendor defect, which was technically arguable given the rack's age, and saved him a week's wages. None of it was her job. None of it came with recognition. Roman asked Stanton to find out why she did it. "I asked her directly," Stanton reported the next morning. Roman looked up. "You asked her?" She said. Stanton checked his notes, a habit he had when he wanted something exact. She said, "Because somebody should." Roman sat with that for a moment. "Anything else?" She asked why you wanted to know. A pause. I told her it was routine. Was she convinced? "No," Stanton said. "She's not particularly easy to convince of things." He found this out himself on a Thursday morning in October. He had skipped breakfast again. There had been a call at 4 in the morning that required his attention in ways he couldn't discuss with anyone at the hotel. And by 8 o'clock he was running on black coffee and the specific adrenaline of someone who has made 2 difficult decisions before dawn and is still waiting to find out if they were right. Someone knocked on his office door. "Come in." Thea Harwell entered carrying a tray, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, and notably, no coffee. "I didn't order this," Roman said. "I know." She set the tray on his desk. "You've skipped breakfast 4 times this week." He looked at her. You've been keeping track? Someone should. She folded her hands in front of her with the particular composure of someone who has made a decision and is not retreating from it. You're going to make decisions today that affect 400 people who work in this building. You should probably do that with actual food in your body. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. It can wait. It genuinely can't. With respect, sir, it probably can. He almost said something sharp. He didn't, because she was watching him with the specific patience of someone who has done the math and knows she's right, and it was, he realized, extremely difficult to argue with someone who does the math. He picked up a fork. Stanton, standing outside the glass-walled office, with 2 department managers waiting for the same meeting, watched Roman Devereaux eat breakfast at his desk for the first time in 3 years. Did she just? One of the managers started. Yes, Stanton said. And he's, actually. Yes. The story of Thea's past came to Roman not through her, but through Stanton, who presented it the way he presented everything difficult, quietly, on a Monday evening when the hotel was nearly empty. It wasn't a dramatic history. That was, Roman thought, the worst part of it. No single catastrophic event. Just years of it, starting in college, too heavy for the campus accounting internship, they'd said, not in those words, but in polite paraphrase about professional presentation and client-facing readiness. A job at a prestigious downtown firm she'd landed on the strength of her scores, where she'd excelled for 2 years before a senior partner called her in to suggest, very gently, that she consider her visibility in client meetings. There was a man named Brent Hayne 4 years ago, whom she had been engaged to. The engagement ended at a work dinner, his work, his colleagues, where someone at the table made a comment about her that Brent had laughed at. Stanton had tracked down a witness who still remembered his exact words when confronted about it afterward. Roman read the line, his jaw tightened. Then the rejection letters, 11 of them, from firms she was overqualified to work for. Interview notes that mentioned culture fit and team dynamics, and once, memorably, the impression the firm needed to make. Not one mentioned her work ethic, not one questioned her abilities. They simply judged what they saw. Roman set the folder aside. How long has she been with the hotel? He asked. 2 years, 4 months, Stanton said. Highest accuracy rate in the department. Lowest error frequency in the company's domestic properties. A pause. She described the position in her cover letter as a place where the numbers would speak for themselves. Roman was quiet for a long time. She thought if she could just find somewhere the work was the only thing that mattered, he said. Not really to Stanton. She'd finally be enough. Yes, Stanton said. And then Cordelia came along. Yes. He found her in the hotel's small courtyard garden 2 days later, eating lunch on a bench with a paperback and the particular self-contained contentment of someone who has made peace with her own company. She looked up when she heard him. Mr. Devereaux. Roman. He sat down across from her without being invited. When we're not in a meeting, you can use my name. She blinked. I'm not sure that's... It's a garden. No one's watching. She looked around, clearly verifying this. 2 groundskeepers near the far wall. A busboy cutting through toward the kitchen, neither paying attention. Okay, she said carefully. Roman. He didn't say anything for a moment. The late October sun was still warm. Somewhere overhead, a sparrow was conducting an extremely committed argument with a window. You're reading tax guidance on your lunch break, he said. She looked down at the book. New IRS revenue recognition standards. I know it's your lunch break. I like numbers. She said it simply, not apologetically. They don't change on you. They're the same every time you go back to them. He understood that more than she probably intended him to. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "The overtime logs from the past 2 months. You covered 3 shifts for overnight team members and adjusted 2 payroll entries to protect people from disciplinary flags." She was quiet. "Those were within my authorization level." "They were. I'm not asking about authorization." He looked at her. "I'm asking why." She thought about it longer than he expected, as though she was searching for the honest answer, rather than the polite one. "Because they were scared," she finally said. "And being scared of losing something you need is a very particular kind of miserable. And sometimes someone with the right access can just make a problem smaller, without making it a whole thing." She paused. "I don't think kindness should need an audience." Roman looked at her across the wrought iron table, in the ordinary courtyard of a hotel he owned, and had never thought of as a place where anything important could happen. "No," he said, "it shouldn't." The Devereaux Foundation's annual dinner fell on the 2nd Friday of November. 300 guests, the hotel's main ballroom, donors, politicians, board members, representatives from every civic organization the foundation supported: education, workforce development, emergency family assistance. Roman had asked Thea to help coordinate the event logistics. The executive team had looked at each other. Roman had not looked at the executive team. Thea accepted the assignment with the same expression she wore when he asked her to explain a vendor invoice discrepancy: focused, slightly skeptical, completely prepared to work until she understood every moving part. She ran the coordination the way she ran her books. Methodically, warmly, with complete attention to the people involved rather than just the tasks. Volunteers were welcomed by name. Caterers were given accurate timelines instead of impossible ones. The facilities crew was consulted, not just directed. By the night of the event, every person who'd worked on it felt, for reasons they couldn't entirely articulate, that their part had mattered. Thea stood near the ballroom entrance in a black dress that fit her exactly as clothes were supposed to fit. Which is to say, well, she had stopped, just for a moment, in front of the mirror in the staff hallway before the doors opened, and she had looked at herself without the usual catalogue of objections, and moved on. It felt oddly like progress. The evening went well. Donations came in above projections. The foundation's executive director gave a presentation that drew sustained applause. Roman moved through the room with the ease of a man who had learned long ago how to be present in formal spaces without being owned by them. He had been watching Thea for most of it. Not obviously. He was careful. But Stanton noticed, which meant it was not as subtle as Roman believed. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Warren Prout appeared. Warren Prout was 62, founder of a real estate development company that had co-sponsored 3 of the foundation's affordable housing initiatives. He was the kind of man who wore his money in the specific way that meant he'd never had to think about whether he deserved it. He had 3 drinks in him and the expansive goodwill of someone who equates success with entitlement to everyone else's time and attention. He spotted Thea near the dessert station and crossed toward her with a proprietary smile. "I know you," he said. She looked up. "I'm with the Foundation's event team. Can I help you with something, Mr. Prout?" "You're the accountant!" He said it the way someone says, of course. The one from the theft story. Thea's expression went very still. "That situation was fully investigated and resolved," she said, quietly, evenly. So they said. He picked up a dessert from the table, looked at it, put it back. "What are you doing here at an event like this?" "I helped organize it." He laughed. The laugh was not meant to be cruel. That, somehow, made it worse. "Really? They had you?" He looked her over in the unself-conscious way that people do when they have never been looked at in that way themselves. "Well, every event needs someone to count the napkins, I suppose." A couple nearby had gone quiet. A Foundation staff member was looking at the floor. Warren leaned slightly forward. The Prout Group has given a lot of money to this foundation. I'm going to have a conversation with Roman Devereaux tonight about some of the unconventional choices being made in his organization. His smile didn't change. You understand. Thea set down the water glass she was holding, very carefully, with the deliberate care of someone deciding, in real time, what kind of person she wants to be in a moment she didn't choose. I understand that you've had a long evening, she said. The car service desk is in the main lobby if you need assistance. It was not a retreat, it was a dismissal. Warren's smile stiffened. He reached out and gripped her wrist, not hard. The casual authority of a man who has never been told his hand wasn't welcome somewhere. I don't think you heard me. Let go of her. Roman's voice wasn't loud enough to carry across the whole ballroom. Only to Warren, and to Thea, and to the half-dozen guests nearest to them, who would spend the next several days describing what they'd witnessed. Roman had been near the stage. He was no longer near the stage. Warren released her wrist. Roman, he forced an awkward smile. I was just having a conversation with you. I know what you were doing. Roman stopped between them. He looked at Thea first, the way he had looked at her in the hallway 3 months ago. Checking, present, deliberate. Are you all right? Yes, she said. She was. She was furious, and her heart was in her throat. But she was also, in some way she would need to examine later, not surprised that he was standing next to her. Roman turned to Warren. You questioned her integrity publicly. You implied she was present in some inappropriate capacity. You put your hand on her without permission. He paused. I've known Thea Harwell for the better part of a year. She is the most thorough financial mind in my organization, and a person of more fundamental decency than anyone else in this room, including me. You had a few drinks and decided that gave you permission to diminish her in front of 300 people. Another pause. It didn't. Roman, we have 3 active development agreements. We don't anymore. The quiet spread from them outward, the way quiet does when something important is said without shouting. Roman stepped away from Warren and onto the stage. The room oriented toward him. The foundation director at the podium stepped aside without being asked. I had remarks prepared, Roman said. I'll skip them. He looked out at the assembled donors and civic leaders and staff members standing along the walls. I want to tell you about someone who has worked in this hotel for 2 years. She arrived after a series of rejections from organizations that told her, without quite saying so, that she didn't present the right image. She spent those 2 years doing her job better than anyone I've employed in that role. And she spent her spare time quietly making the lives of the people around her a little easier, without asking for recognition, without making it anyone else's problem. He paused. 3 months ago, she was publicly accused of theft, physically restrained, and struck in the face by a senior director who had spent months constructing a false case against her. The investigation closed in 4 hours. She was completely innocent. Gasps rippled through the room. Justice on paper doesn't erase humiliation, he continued. It doesn't undo years of being told that appearance determines value. It doesn't return the confidence that gets taken from someone one dismissal at a time. He found her in the crowd, near the dessert table, shoulders back, eyes too bright. Her name is Thea Harwell. She organized this event because she earned the responsibility. If anyone in this room is uncertain about what caliber of person belongs at a Devereaux Foundation dinner, I'd suggest using her as your benchmark, not the other way around. The applause began somewhere near the back. It moved forward through the room slowly at first, then faster. Foundation staff, hotel employees, board members, donors who had arrived expecting a pleasant obligation and were now, in the way of unexpected things, genuinely moved. Thea stood in the center of it and couldn't quite make herself move. She had spent so many years making herself small, taking up less air, apologizing for her presence in rooms like this one, and now the room was applauding for her, because of her, and she had no framework for that. And the tears came not from shame and not from fear, but from something she couldn't name yet that felt like a door opening somewhere inside her. Roman descended from the stage. He looked at Warren Prout, who had not left. Stanton will have the termination documentation to your attorney by morning. He turned away without waiting for a response. Good night, Warren. Warren left. No one filled the space where he'd been standing. Later, much later, when the guests were gone and the staff was breaking down the ballroom and the November air outside had turned cold and clear, Roman found Thea in the hotel's small roof garden, which technically closed at 10, but which the overnight facilities manager had quietly unlocked for her. She was standing at the railing, looking out over the city. She heard him before she turned. His footsteps. The particular sound of someone who walks like they own whatever floor they're standing on, which in this case was technically accurate. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know. It's going to cost you, the Prout Group. Thea. She stopped. I didn't do it for the math, he said. She turned around. He was leaning against the wall a few feet away, his jacket draped over his arm, because the evening had been long, and he'd stopped performing the version of himself that required the jacket. Why, then? She asked. He considered this with the seriousness she'd come to recognize in him. The specific attention he gave to things he was going to say only once, and only if he meant them. I've been watching you for 3 months, he said. Not because I was suspicious of anything, because I couldn't stop. He paused. You walk into a room and you make yourself small because you've been taught that's what you're supposed to do. And then you do something that makes the whole room larger, and you never seem to notice. Thea looked at him. I noticed the night of the investigation, he said. When Cordelia was escorted out, every person in that room was relieved. You were. He seemed to search for the word. Somewhere else. Like the truth being proven wasn't actually the thing that had hurt you most. She was quiet for a moment. The worst part was the silence, she said finally. When they were holding my arms and everyone just watched, I kept thinking, if nobody says anything, it means they all believe I deserve this. She looked down at her hands on the railing. I've thought that so many times, in different rooms, for different reasons, that I must deserve it if nobody stops it. You didn't deserve any of it, Roman said. Not tonight, not 3 months ago. Not the firm that said your numbers weren't the issue, but your image was. Not the man who chose the comfort of strangers' laughter over the woman he claimed to love. She looked up sharply. Stanton's thorough, Roman said, not as an apology, as a fact. She laughed, unexpectedly, a short sound that caught in her throat. Of course he is. I'm not going to apologize for knowing. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough to be deliberate about it. I'm sorry it happened. I'm not sorry, I know. Because I need you to understand that I am not looking at you and deciding you're worth something despite what the world told you. I'm looking at you and genuinely failing to understand how anyone who met you saw anything other than what I see. Thea's throat was very tight. What do you see? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. Someone who pays a stranger's pharmacy bill and tells them to keep her name off it, he said. Someone who covers a grieving man's shifts and writes it up as administrative discretion. Someone who told the junior accountant who made a mistake that it didn't mean anything permanent about who he was. A pause. Someone who brought me breakfast because she'd calculated I was making 400 people's decisions on caffeine and spite, and decided that was her problem to fix. Thea pressed her lips together. Someone, he said quietly, who deserves to be in any room she walks into. Not because I said so. Because she's earned it, in 100 small ways that nobody thought to credit. The city below them kept moving in its ordinary way, indifferent to any of this. "I don't know how to do this," Thea said, "whatever this is." "Neither do I," Roman said. "I know how to run an organization. I know how to make things stop." "I'm not." He looked at her with something unguarded, which on him was unusual enough to be striking. "I'm not practiced at telling someone I'd like to stay close to them, if they'll let me." She looked up at him. "That's an unusual way to put it," she said. "I'm an unusual person." The silence between them was the kind that didn't require filling. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. You can stay close." She turned back to look at the city. "If you eat breakfast." Something shifted in his expression, nearly a laugh, nearly a surrender, entirely both. "That's a condition. It's a requirement." 6 months later, Thea Harwell became the Director of Financial Integrity for the Devereaux Group's full portfolio of legitimate businesses, 12 properties, 2 development entities, and a charitable foundation that had, in the past quarter, expanded its employee assistance programs to include confidential counseling, emergency family support, and a mentorship initiative for first-generation professionals who kept being told their qualifications were strong, but their presence didn't fit the image. She ran the first workshop herself on a Saturday morning in the hotel's conference center with 34 employees who had responded to an open invitation sent without fanfare to the full staff list. She said, "At the beginning, I spent a long time trying to become someone else so that the work I did would matter. I know now that was the wrong equation. We're here because the work matters, because you matter, not in spite of anything, not despite anything. As you are, exactly, right now." Roman sat in the back row. He had not told her he would be there. When she saw him, she raised an eyebrow. He mouthed, "I ate breakfast." She turned back to the room before she smiled, because 34 people were watching and she was a professional, but the smile happened anyway. Wide and private and entirely her own, the smile of someone who has finally, after a very long time, stopped waiting for the world to grant her permission to take up space in it. She had decided that herself. And it turned out that was the only permission she'd ever needed.